everyone, and welcome to Tuesdays with Trailblazers, brought to you by TechEdgeAI, the video podcast where we bring you the latest trends and insights in AI and technology. I'm your host Sidesh, and today we have with us Andy Syrewicze, the Evangelist, Hornetsecurity. He provides technical marketing, sales, and content creation capabilities for the IT community on the company's behalf. Additionally, he is involved in the wider IT community in a number of different ways, including podcasts, webinars, blogging, and public speaking. So without further ado, let's welcome Andy. Hey Andy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing wonderful. Well, we're quite excited to see what wonderful insights you have for us today.
Sure thing. I'm looking forward to it, and thanks for having us.
Perfect. So first things first, Andy, very few times we actually get a podcaster doing a podcast with us. So as a podcaster talking to another podcaster, what do you believe makes a podcast good beyond downloads and algorithms? And also, what philosophy helps you choose conversations that truly resonate with listeners?
I think the important thing is knowing where your customers are at and what type of information they're looking for, right? Because I could certainly go out and pick 5, 6, 7 different topics that I think are interesting. It doesn't mean my audience thinks they're interesting necessarily, right? And so for me, it's always asking that question, what does the audience want? And hopefully as podcasters, we give it to them, right?
Absolutely. Do your research thoroughly, right? So know your audience well, do your research thoroughly, and it's kind of a formula to a hit podcast. That's what people do, right?
That's
Hopefully,
right.
absolutely. So Andy, you've done everything, right? From configuring an end user's mouse cursor to look like a dinosaur, to architecting and implementing large-scale, fault-tolerant cloud solutions for, SMBs, SMEs, and enterprises. So how did that transition go?
It's the career's been interesting. My background certainly is technical, and I was in the trenches as an IT guy, a security guy, infrastructure guy for many, many years. And eventually one day I got sick and tired of the 2 a.m. phone call that, hey, everything's broken, come fix it, please, And so about 10 years ago, got into this technical marketing thing, right? So I still keep my technical saw sharp, as it were, right? I still do some technical work here and there, but my core job these days is talking with fine people like yourself and your audience about technology, educating the public about technical solutions, and just geeking out about tech, right? That's kind of what I focus on these days. So it's interesting because I still have that one foot in the technology, but I also have one foot in kind of the marketing and sales realm as well. So I kind of see it from both of those standpoints, which is kind of a unique place to look at the industry from.
Makes sense, and I'm quite intrigued about this mouse cursor looking like a dinosaur. What's the story behind that one?
So I was working for a managed service provider at the time, right? So we serviced a number of different businesses of all shapes and sizes, right? And we get this mysterious, I don't want to say mysterious ticket that came in from one of our customers. I think I was there to fix a different issue, which I had already taken care of. And it was kind of one of these things like, oh, hey, by the way, on this machine over here, it'd be really cool if we could make the mouse cursor look like a dinosaur. And mind you, this was I don't remember if it was a preschool or if it was there were little kids around, right? And so it was kind of like a fun, hey, this would be nice for the little kids type of thing. But still, it's like, yeah, I could do that really quick, and I often, talk about that particular incident as, one of the more unique asks I've ever had in the tech space. Certainly not difficult from a technical perspective, but not a request you hear every day, that's for sure.
That's quite interesting and makes me believe in that phrase, that grown-ups will always be kids with, grown-up money. So let's start with the big one, Andy. A lot of marketeers out there still believe if they just write better subject lines or, let's say, clean their lists, deliverability will fix itself. So I'm just curious, what's the biggest misconception they still have about why email lands in, these emails land in spam folders?
Yeah, to me I've run into this quite a bit with different marketers over the years. They still assume that security scanners, reputational scanners, all that stuff that screens email as it flows through the ecosystem, they still assume it's just like it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, right? And they assume the same, email deliverability best practices applied now as they did 5-10 years ago. And while email itself is, as a technology, largely the same as it has been for a long time, the security and the reputational side of it is vastly different, even in just the last couple of years here, right? And so when it comes to sending emails, I think marketers have to have a special careful eye on things like DMARC, DKIM, SPF, those email authentication protocols, because the big players in the space, the Microsofts, the Googles of the world, are starting to really focus in on those, right? So I think those are, they play a big role in, like you said, those common misconceptions. You can't assume that things are today as they were 5 years ago.
Got it. Now, let's simplify things for a moment. For someone who isn't technical, heard a lot of terms, and that includes a lot of C-suites, right? So how do you explain terminologies like DMARC and why it matters for protecting brand reputation?
Yeah, for sure. So you hear DMARC, it's often associated with DKIM and SPF. So there's like these 3 email authentication protocols we have. And so DMARC stands for Domain Messaging Authentication Reporting and Conformance. There we go. We have acronyms on top of acronyms in tech, right?
Sure.
But basically, the way these protocols work is the whole goal is to verify the authenticity of a piece of mail, right? Mm-hmm. Not only the mail itself, but the entire delivery chain. And so the way that these 3 protocols work together is, it all starts with SPF, stands for Sender Policy Framework, right? Technical name, right? But it's very simple when it comes down to it. What SPF does is it tells the world, all of the email from, I'll use myself as an example, all the email from andyontech.com only comes from this source. If it comes from anywhere else, it's probably not from andyontech.com, right? That's what SPF does. Then we have DKIM, which is Domain Keys Identified Mail. Again, big, nasty technical term. Basically what DKIM does is it's a technical stamp that gets put on every piece of mail, right? When the recipient side receives that email, it looks at that digital stamp, and if it's correct, that means that that piece of mail was not altered in any way from beginning to end of the delivery chain. Now, DMARC is what brings it all together. DMARC tells the world, tells recipient mail servers what to do when SPF and DKIM checks fail, or one or the other, right? When checks fail, what does the recipient mail server do? Does it just get rid of it? Does it put it in the junk folder? Does it ignore that warning? That's what DMARC does, right? And so these 3 protocols all working in tandem really adds a layer of authenticity to our mail communication and helps me as the recipient verify that the piece of email that I received is actually from who it says it's from when it comes right down to it.
Got it. And that trust or lack of it has real business impact, right? So what does this poor DMARC management actually cost a company? When you look at things like missed revenues, damaged list health, and sender reputation.
For sure. And it's the right question to be asking, because at its most simple form, poor DMARC management ultimately causes your marketing messages to not get delivered, right? Mm-hmm. And that, everybody who's in marketing understands the direct impact of your message is not landing there. It's wasted effort, right? You're not getting your message in front of prospects. You're not, communicating sales. It's a whole domino effect, right? But the problem is with DMARC, I've simplified it and made it sound really easy. These protocols can be very touchy, very difficult to configure, because it's all done at a text level inside of a DNS records, and the syntax has to be followed very rigidly. So it's very easy for organizations to end up with what we call in the industry DMARC misalignment. Basically means something with these 3 protocols on your domain have been misconfigured in some way, and they're not playing nicely in the sandbox together, right? And so ultimately what ends up happening then is a recipient email server can see that, okay, your DMARC settings aren't operating correctly, or they're incorrect, or it looks like it's malicious because they're misconfigured, and it ultimately leads to that non-delivery issue that we just talked about, right? And so it makes it doubly important that when you put these protocols in place, you do it correctly. And it's even more important because, I mentioned earlier, the big, mail providers in the world are starting to put a heavier emphasis specifically on DMARC. So that's Google, that's Microsoft, right? They have a bigger focus on email authentication now than they used to.
Got it. Now let's zoom out, look ahead. Email is evolving fast. It wasn't the same 2 years back, 3 years back, and compliance expectations are rising just as quickly, right? So, how do you see email authentication evolving, and what should brands be doing today to stay ahead of new requirements?
For sure, for sure. So, I got done talking about the big players, the Googles, the Microsofts of the world, right? As a email security community, we have known for some time now that threat actors love to use email as the first step of an attack, right? Because it's the human factor, right? The human is often the weakest link in the chain, right?
Yep.
And so we figured out very quickly that email authentication protocols are a really good way to help stop threat actors from using email so often in their attacks, right? And so that's why there's this big push in the industry, especially from the big players, to start mandating DMARC checks, DKIM checks, right, all that type of stuff. And Microsoft and Google both, I forget the exact dates, but it wasn't that long ago, they both started putting, requiring more emphasis on those types of checks for the consumer side of their email delivery business. Now, I can't speak to Google, but being involved in enterprise tech as long as I have, I've seen Microsoft go through a lot of iterations over the years. And it would not surprise me if I look at my crystal ball here, to see they start mandating the same type of stance as they do on consumer delivery today, on top of things like Microsoft 365 and those more enterprise-focused email delivery solutions, right? So they don't have those same requirements on Microsoft 365, but I would bet money they're coming at some point. And so that's all to say that if you are working on delivering large amounts of mail to enterprise customers, that will probably impact your deliverability somewhere down the line. So it's better to get on the DMARC wagon today than wait until the last minute, right? So in short, I guess my recommendation would be get your DMARC house in order today and don't wait.
I'm a rookie email marketer, right? And my SPF is sorted, my DKIM is sorted, my DMARC is sorted. I know a cleaner list would be important for me, right? So if everything is sorted as a rookie email marketer, what would you suggest to me in terms of a stack or in terms of, processes to make sure my deliverability is top notch?
Well, I think this kind of builds on top of DMARC and DKIM. It's part of it, but it builds on top of it. So the first step is getting your email authentication in order. But what happens next is the ongoing monitoring and reportability, right? So once you have DMARC in place, you'll get regular reports from the big players that, hey, this object was delivered via this mail server on this date, and it gives you this big, ugly, nasty-looking XML report. I mean, it's just a dump of text, and it's really difficult to parse through it and really understand what it's telling you, right? Now, if you're a rookie marketer, you don't want to be looking at XML files. It's not a fun time. So you want to go out and find a tool, and this is a little bit self-serving because, surprise, we have a tool like this at Hornetsecurity, but we have a tool that actually not only makes configuring DMARC easy, but it also makes that ongoing, the part that comes after that monitoring reporting, a lot easier too. And so you can see specific deliverability stats. You can see if anybody's trying to send as you, in case somebody's trying to spoof your domain somewhere. And so there's a lot of visibility that you get afterwards. I've talked with some marketers that, they just send off their mail and hope for the best. Well, it's kind of nice to know what's going on after the fact too, right? And that's where a DMARC management and monitoring tool comes into play. And that would be my recommendation over and above that.
Perfect. And this is one question I had from a personal help standpoint, back like 5 to 3 years ago, sending emails, reaching out to the right folks, getting more responses. Down the line, these stringent policies that have come from Gmail, that have come from Outlook, the Microsofts and the Googles that we spoke about, have made sure that, my emails, although with clear messaging and proper subject lines, end up majorly in spam for, I don't know, whatever reason it might be. So do you believe, like you said, you put the crystal ball out there, do you believe that the stringency is going to be there for a longer time, or is there going to be a bit of ease in terms of the stringencies, and we'll live in a world where actually emails do land up you get a lot of responses as salespeople and email marketers on our end?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, I've been in this industry for a long time now, and when I think about security policies and compliance policies across the industry, I have only ever seen them get more stringent. I have never seen them relaxed. So I think the stricter policies that we see being put into place today, I would expect them to stick around. I don't think they're going to go anywhere. And I think, if anything, they're just going to evolve and probably get even more strict over time. I could see a place someday where, AI is a buzzword. Yes, totally agreed. But it does have its place in the security community, and I could see AI being used to help sort marketing mail from malicious, right? I can already do that to an extent today, but not with 100% accuracy, right? So yeah, it's one of those things we're going to have to wait and see as an industry.
Got it. And because you spoke about AI, I think we can probably, actually include this question as well, which connects to AI, right? So a lot of organizations are excited about tools like Microsoft Copilot. So, but not all of them are ready for it, right? Before jumping into Copilot, what foundational data hygiene steps should your CTOs prioritize to avoid compounding existing problems?
That's a very good question, and this is something that us security folks have been looking at a lot over the last couple of years. And so what I've seen time and time again in the industry is people get excited about AI. They want to use AI to solve all the problems, right? But so many of them are really quick to just flip it on and go. They don't stop to think about the security, privacy, and compliance implications of that tool. I'll use Copilot for Microsoft 365 as the example here. There's a bunch of different Copilots, but let's focus on that one specifically because in the business world, that seems to be one of the more popular ones. So Copilot for Microsoft 365 is, an AI assistant, but it has understanding and it has access to any of the data inside of Microsoft 365 that you as the user have access to. Now, where does that cause a problem? I have yet to see an organization that does a good job of wrapping their hands around SharePoint data, OneDrive data, and properly managing sharing and permissions. Because the native tooling in 365 is just not good for that. But that's a whole different discussion. Anyway, most people's SharePoint and OneDrive houses are completely out of order. And AI, while great, Copilot, while great, it does surface information very quickly and very easily. And now, if you just flip it on in an environment without really understanding what your visibility posture is like inside of Microsoft 365. Now you have situations where, whoops, this user surfaced payroll information using Copilot. Or this user has access to the HR folder and they easily identified that. Realistically, they probably already had access to it. It was probably already misconfigured and they just didn't know it, right? But Copilot surfaces that fact much easier. So our recommendation for folks that are thinking about utilizing Copilot within their Microsoft 365 environment is get a handle on your permissions and your sharing structure inside of the platform first. Worry about the security and compliance first, and then flip it on after that.
Got it. I mean, that makes a whole lot of sense, to be honest. And yeah, that was the last question for the day. Thank you so much, Andy. I mean, a lot of it has been insightful. This is something which is close to me because of the fact I closely work with my email marketers as well. So I mean, this is an ongoing problem if you ask me. To be, I mean, I've seen the hassle across these couple of years in the past years. It was kind of seamless in the early 20s, to be honest, and it's kind of taken a downhill since the time these guys introduced these new policies. If I were to say, your Googles and your Microsofts. Does Microsoft actually follow Google, or is it the other way around? I quite don't get it.
You know what? I'm not sure on that one. No clue. To be honest, I think it flip-flops, but I couldn't tell you for sure.
Got it. Perfect. I mean, that is quite insightful, Andy. Really enjoyed you hosting on our podcast Tuesdays with Trailblazers. And thank you all for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time, stay tuned with TechAGI for more insights. Till we meet again, signing off, your host, Siddesh.